Political assassinations are not an unheard of thing in American history. 4 US presidents have been assassinated. Being a politician is often a dangerous job. What is much more unusual is for one elected official to assassinate other elected officials holding similar positions. Just such a thing happened in San Francisco in 1978. Our story centers around 3 politicians, 2 murdered men and 1 murderer. Let's meet our cast of characters now. Harvey Milk is probably the most famous name in our trio, the first openly gay elected official in the state of California, and the subject of a 2008 biopic titled Milk. Harvey Milk was born on Long Island and attended the New York State College for Teachers in Albany. He served in the Korean War and briefly worked on Barry Goldwater's 1964 campaign for president. In the early 70s, Milk moved to San Francisco, where he opened up a camera store with his partner Scott Smith. Milk became very involved in his community, and began to be known as the mayor of Castro Street, the main drag of the Castro neighborhood where gay men had begun to gravitate towards in the 70s. Milk was a true dyed-in-the-wool progressive, fighting for minority and elder rights from the beginning. He launched 3 separate campaigns for Supervisor, the first 2 of which did not go his way. He would have better luck in 1977, right before the year of our fateful story.
When you get a letter from a person in Southwest Africa asking for hope, when you get a phone call from a 17-year-old child in a small town in Minnesota who is handicapped and whose parents found out that he's gay and wanted to commit him to an asylum, and you become his lifeline, then you know you got to do a good job.
George Moscone was born in the Italian-American enclave of San Francisco's Marina District. He became a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 1963, and advocated against the construction of proposed freeways that would have damaged the fabric of the city of San Francisco. Moscone rose in the ranks of the California Democratic Party, becoming a state senator and soon after majority leader for the Democrats. He was a progressive and early proponent of gay rights. In 1974, he launched a successful campaign for mayor of San Francisco, beating out Dianne Feinstein amongst others. He would serve until 1978.
So I can just tell you this, it's the grandest moment of my life to be the mayor of this city. They only give you 2 shots at it, and I'd be very surprised if I didn't take advantage of that.
Our final character is Dan White, who at best is sort of a tragic figure, and at worst is simply an evil man. Dan White was raised by working-class parents in South San Francisco, born into an Irish-American family of 9 children. He served in the Vietnam War and worked as a police officer and firefighter for several years. He ran for the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 1977 as a Democrat and won.
Well, I find it very fascinating, very interesting. People ask me, are you having fun? And that's the furthest thing from my mind. I could never describe it as fun, but it's quite an education.
Dan White and Harvey Milk were both elected in 1977 to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, 2 members in a board of 11. The Board of Supervisors had switched from an at-large voting system to district-based voting, which allowed for members which represented the characteristics of their district. Lawyers were replaced with community activists, and a gay man like Harvey Milk was able to be elected to the board. In addition to Harvey Milk being the first gay man to serve on the board, San Francisco elected its first Chinese-American supervisor, Gordon Lau, the first single mother, Carol Ruth Silver, and the first African-American woman, Ella Hill Hutch. Despite what you might think about politicians, being supervisor in San Francisco in 1978 was no get-rich-quick scheme. Supervisors only made $9,500, or $40,000 in today's dollars, which didn't get you very far in San Francisco. Dan White soon began to have financial troubles. The $9,600 salary of supervisor wasn't making ends meet, driving him to open a snack food business on Pier 39 in the Fisherman's Wharf neighborhood. In what in retrospect seems like a regrettably impulsive decision, White resigned from his position due to financial pressures in November of 1978, 1 year after his election. Almost immediately, White had a change of heart and decided that he wanted his position back, and he wanted it badly. White's resignation was originally drowned out of the news cycle, when on November 18, 1978, word broke out that almost 1,000 people from the People's Temple, a cult formerly located in San Francisco, committed mass suicide in Guyana. Jim Jones, the leader of the People's Temple, was instrumental in helping George Moscone win his 1975 bid for mayor. The People's Temple is a fascinating story for another day. The power lay in Mayor Moscone's hands. The mayor of San Francisco had the power to appoint someone to a vacant seat, and therefore the mayor had the power to reappoint Dan White, or someone else. At first it seemed like Moscone would reappoint White, but after he was lobbied by Harvey Milk and others on the board, he decided against it. This would prove to be fatal for him. On the morning of November 28, 1978, White arrived at City Hall, driven by an unsuspecting aide, and armed with his police-issued revolver. White decided to climb through a basement window in City Hall to avoid being detected by guards at the main entrances of the building. He requested a meeting with the mayor, who at the time was meeting with future mayor Willie Brown. The mayor agreed to meet with Dan White, though the outcome would not be as White had hoped. George Moscone told Dan White that he wasn't going to reappoint him. Moscone could see that White was visibly upset, so he welcomed him into the mayor's lounge for a couple of drinks. It was inside the lounge that White made the decision to shoot and kill Moscone. He shot Moscone several times, including once in the head. He then exited the office, being stopped in the hallway by Dianne Feinstein. Dianne Feinstein is presently a senator from California, but at the time she was president of the Board of Supervisors. When Dan White walked by her on that day in November 1978, she was unaware that the mayor had just been murdered in cold blood. White brushed her off, saying, "I have something to do first." White proceeded to the offices of the Board of Supervisors, where he intercepted Harvey Milk, asking him to step inside his former office. According to White, his goal was to convince Harvey Milk that he was a good supervisor who ought to get his job back, which was pretty delusional thinking considering that he had just shot Moscone in cold blood. According to White, Milk smirked at White's pleas rather than displaying any sort of sympathy, which prompted White to shoot Milk several times, including, like Moscone, deliberately in the head. It was Dianne Feinstein who found the body of Harvey Milk face down on the floor. She would announce to the public that Moscone and Milk had been assassinated and that Dan White was the principal suspect.
President of the Board of Supervisors, it's my duty to make this announcement. Both Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk have been shot and killed.
Jesus Christ!
The suspect is Supervisor Dan White.
Dan White's lawyers argued that White had acted with diminished mental capacity. In what would become known as the Twinkie defense, they argued that White's depression was exhibited in part by his decision to start consuming unhealthy foods. He would end up serving less than 6 years in prison for what could have given him the death penalty. It's worth noting that Dianne Feinstein would ascend to the position of mayor, as she was head of the Board of Supervisors at the time. Feinstein had wanted to be mayor for a while, but it took a double homicide for her to get there. She would go on to be a U.S. Senator for the state of California, a position she has served in for nearly 30 years. Many have ascribed Dan White's motives to be related to some sort of anti-gay sentiment, but many people familiar with the matter dismiss this theory as overly simplistic. Dan White and Harvey Milk were known to have gotten along on the board, and White even invited Milk to the christening of his son. White even voted for some of the legislation that honored or aided the gay community, though his record was certainly mixed in this area. A more likely explanation is that Dan White felt deeply wronged by Mayor Moscone for not reappointing him to his position. It's hard to argue that the murder wasn't at least a bit premeditated, because White brought a loaded weapon to City Hall that day, but some degree of impulsivity factored into the incident. In any case, White's despicable act is still remembered to this day as a tragedy for the gay community and the city of San Francisco. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and follow us on Instagram at @the_DC show.